For this final edition of 2020, I want to share some moments from this year's interviews, some of which were not included on the radio show. If you're following the podcast, you've already heard some of the complete, unedited conversations with rockers like Glenn Hughes, Jeff Scott Soto, Mark Farner, and lots more where that came from. In the meantime, enjoy these moments. At the end of this episode, I will share my thoughts on the effects of COVID-19 on the entertainment industry. Best wishes for a fantastic new year, and thanks for listening. I caught up with Chip from Enuff Znuff a few months after we toured Australia together in March of 2020. Joining me on the streets of rock and roll this week, Chip Znuff. Hello, Chip. How are you, my friend?
Mr. Keel, it's good to hear your pipes. Last time I seen you was in lovely Australia when we were stuck out there on that tour.
That's right. You and I were just on tour together, 3 months ago in Australia. Seems like forever ago. A lot's changed since then. I heard you guys had some travel issues. Are you still stuck in Melbourne due to the travel ban?
No, I'm not. Unfortunately, I was stuck out there for about a week. I was hanging out with Kip Winger, and he was stuck out there as well, along with there's a couple of Reckless, Pretty Reckless, I think they're called.
Wow.
Reckless Love, that's who it was. Yeah, because there was a lot of bands that were out there when we were touring. If I'm not mistaken, the guys from the Pixies were out there. I know that I've seen them in a club hanging out drinking. And they also had Whitesnake and Scorpions were out there as well. So a lot of rock and roll happening over in beautiful Melbourne and Sydney, Australia. And the women out there are beautiful. But anyway, I was able to somehow find a ticket and get back to the United States. And the day I returned here, I'm in Chicago right now, they announced on TV that they're shutting down the borders. So I was hours away from being stuck in Melbourne, which, folks, believe me, would not be a bad thing.
Exactly. What a beautiful country and a beautiful city as well. That was a blast, man. We had a great time down under. And Chip, you and I have known each other a long time, but I feel like we really became friends on that tour. It was Enuff Znuff, Ron Keel, Janet Gardner, and the Aussie band Cross On. We dubbed it The Amazing Race because we just kept wandering around Australia picking up clues as to where the next show was, what hotel are we at, how are we getting to the airport, all that, man. But what a great experience, and I'm glad we got to share that.
I certainly am, too. And anybody that hasn't went to Australia, I recommend getting out there as soon as this all shut down, opens back up again. What a beautiful country. People are friendly out there and nice. Great rock and roll. The food, the wine, the women, everything about that place is A+. I just love that country beyond belief.
My friend David Reece, the metal voice who replaced Udo in Accept in 1989, shared his bird's eye view of the pandemic early on from his home in Italy. As we speak, David, the entire world is in the grip of the global coronavirus pandemic. Very strange times, my friend. And you're in Italy, as you mentioned, certainly one of the hardest hit nations. I assume you're isolated like everyone else. How are you and your family doing, and how are you handling this crisis personally and professionally?
Thank you for asking, Will. It started off in a little village called Codogno, about 30 miles from me, where I actually record at a studio called Tanzan Studios. The great Mario Percadani, who plays with Hardline, owns that. It's also a music school. And I was actually there recording vocal demos about a week before it exploded. And the next thing you know, some guy turns up with this virus, and they shut down his village, his school. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, my wife and I were in there late at night, kids are using microphones, touching everything. Oh my God. And the guy that caught it first, they closed down his workplace with over 200 people. And his wife didn't catch it. He survived it, but they're still on lockdown. So there's a bridge that divides those two towns, mine and his. There was, armed security there where you couldn't cross over. But of course, they say, all right, go ahead and get your supplies, whatever. So they started letting a few in. I was supposed to do my record release shows in Germany on the 13th and 14th of March. A week before, everything was all systems go, my area. And then on the Saturday prior to that, my wife, who works in the government, actually yelled out loud, oh my God, they're talking about closing the north down, which is the Lombardy district. I'm sure you're familiar with it, Milano, all that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, nah, it ain't going to happen, you know. And by 11 p.m. that night, the whole north of Italy was on lockdown, which meant only necessary, you know, goods to go through the Swiss border. We were going to drive, about a 5-hour drive for the shows, and she was going to hang out with me. Probably 2 days later, Conti announced the whole country was on lockdown. What it's done, at first, you know, I'm not going to lie, it was disappointing. You know, ticket sales were great. People are excited about the album. You know, we had high hopes, and then boom, it was pulled out from under us. And, you know, calling the venues, they're like, oh, nothing's wrong. Take the back roads, you know, you can get here. And I'm like, no, man, you don't understand. They've locked us in. And then a couple of days later, the country's closed down. And then, of course, all the clubs in Germany and tours started falling apart. I mean, by the day. I mean, 10 tours a day were falling apart. That was pretty weird. But then I got over my, you know, poor me thing and went, wait a minute, this is a bad deal. This is for the best. So we are holed up in our home, the two boys and my wife and I, and basically we walk the dog around the street a little bit in the morning and evening. Don't go anywhere. We're allowed to go to pharmacies or grocery. That's it, because all other businesses are closed. It's a friggin' ghost town. The highway near my house is really loud. There's nothing moving right now. I'm looking out the window. A few trucks, you know, food trucks and stuff. It's a really bad time, Ron. I went through the LA riots. I went through the Northridge earthquake. I went through the Malibu fires, and I thought that was Armageddon. But this is just an eerie, frightening time. I don't know really what I think about it.
Always cool to get a Hall of Famer on the line. And my conversation with Vivian Campbell from Def Leppard, Whitesnake, Dio, and Last in Line was a highlight for me. And here's a piece of that discussion specifically for the podcast. Viv, how do you feel about cell phones in the air at every show that we do?
It's really annoying, I gotta say. You know, I don't understand it. You know, I don't understand why people don't want to experience and be in the moment. I mean, that's what life is really about. Is about appreciating the moment that you have. You know, with people, with other people, with community, with family, with friends, with live music. You know, real musicians playing real music in a room in real time. That's a great, joyous, communal experience. I understand that people want something to post on social media or some sort of memento from it, but by watching this show through your cell phone, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And when you listen back to it the next day, it's going to sound like shite. So I don't get it, you know. And also, you know, the whole social media thing, I think can be very, very intrusive. I mean, I find people taking cell phone videos of us all the time, even when we're trying to, you know, scratch our bum or do something. Yeah. You know, it's just, I appreciate human interaction. And I also appreciate a little bit of civility and a little bit of privacy. So I'm not a fan of it.
I agree and totally concur, man. I don't understand why it annoys the performers and it annoys everybody else in the audience except the one guy who's doing it and posting the video the next day on YouTube. Another question for you, Vivian. Athletes, actors, and musicians making political statements. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I think everyone is entitled to an opinion. But unfortunately, I think we live in very polarizing times. Yeah. So I personally, I mean, like I had a personal Facebook page that I haven't been on for a few years because I did express, you know, opinions beyond music because it was a personal page. And, you know, the blowback was just brutal and intense. I think, you know, there's a lot of civility and human interaction and discourse has gone in the gutter, you know, thanks to people communicating in these very indirect ways through social media. I think we're getting pulled into a time when people have to make that hard choice. You know, even corporations, like even look what's happening with the NBA and China at the moment. Yeah. You know, because, you know, so does the NBA and the huge corporations like Nike that make a fortune with concurrent with the NBA. I mean, do they take a political stand on this? I think it's important, yeah. I think you kind of have to. I think people are starting to vote their politics with their pocketbooks, like, issues like gun control and gender association and equal rights for people. I think some corporations are defining themselves by getting involved in politics. It's a very, very complex issue, and I don't think there's an easy answer to it. And I think it's a very dangerous time for any sort of a celebrity, be you an actor or athlete or musician, to draw a line in the sand on that. With Def Leppard, one thing that Joe said to me when I joined the band many, many years ago, and this was way before the current political climate. He said that Def Leppard has always been about escapism. He says, we don't write political songs, we don't proselytize, we don't preach to people. We want to offer escapism, like a Spielberg movie, just kind of like where people can lose themselves in something and get away from all of that real world stuff. And so I do think there's a lot to be said for that, and Def Leppard as a band, we are very much apolitical. We just offer entertainment, but as individuals, when we're back in the dressing room, we all have political views and we all have moral stances on things, but it's a very, very dangerous thing to use your pulpit, if you like, to use your stature in the world to try and tell other people how to live. But ultimately, I think, as people, we'll all get through this. I just think we're in a very, very ugly time at the moment where I think our leadership in a lot of the world, not just in this country, has kind of brought us into the gutter and is trying to exploit the differences that we have. But I think that as human beings, we all have a lot more in common than we have that separating us, I mean, everyone has family, everyone bleeds red, regardless of the color of your skin. Everyone just wants to be safe and secure and loved. And I think, as people, we need to learn how to communicate better. And as a musician, I don't want to preach. I just want to play guitar, and then hopefully music will help heal. I find music to be very cathartic, especially in times of stress. And so I'll do what I can as a musician to bring people together and try and hopefully help people realize that love is a stronger emotion than hatred.
Most of my fans know the song Ghost Riders in the Sky is a signature tune for Ron Keel Band, and our version appears on the 2020 release South by South Dakota. It was really cool to hear Outlaws guitarist Freddie Salem describe what it was like recording their classic version of that Southern rock anthem. Now, before the interview, before we went on the air, you had mentioned that you actually knew who I was, and you complimented our version of Ghost Riders on our new album South by South Dakota. You guys made that song into a Southern rock anthem. You played on that session, man. Anything special you can tell me about that tune in particular?
Well, we were in the studio in Los Angeles, the record plant on when it was on, it's moved since, when it was on 3rd and La Cienega. Yeah. And at that point, we had stepped up the game a bit as far as a little more intense. We're kind of trying to shy away from the country rock thing for the past couple albums. We were having success with it on tour, and because the intensity level rose tremendously. We changed our stage amplifiers from PVs into Marshalls. we were rocking, and Huey and Billy were right along with the program. And plus it started to run, we started selling out big rooms like Madison Square Garden and the Spectrum and Long Beach Arena and the Forum and so on and so forth. So you can't argue with success, right?
Yeah.
And forget artistry. We need success. But Huey really lied. Huey was the figurehead of the band. He was such an intense player in any genre of music. Well, we were in there, and we had chosen different types of producers at that point. A couple albums before, we used Mutt Lange. He produced Playing to Win. And on this album, we chose another hard rock producer who had pretty big success, and his name was Ron Nevison.
Oh, yeah.
Huey came up with the Ghost Riders idea, and Ron Nevison ran with it. It took us about 8 days to cut the bed track for that song. It just wasn't happening. Finally, after about 7-8 days, it hit, and Nevison knew it, and he was a taskmaster. He would not let anything slip to the wayside. If it wasn't absolutely on point, he would reject it right away. So he just kept massaging him. He brought in some great classic Western background singers that I think a couple of them used to sing with Roy Rogers.
Wow. And
they did the backgrounds, and he brought in John Sinclair, the British keyboard player. That's how it all developed. The album went gold right away. Yeah. And it was a good memory of that time.
I love supporting new rising rockers on the streets of rock and roll, and I asked Las Vegas musician and RFL Records recording artist Jeff Carlson from the Jeff Carlson Band about his online approach during the lockdown. You do a ton of social media interaction and online entertaining. How has that helped you get through this lockdown? Absolutely. Dear friend. Yeah.
Me too. He's really good. He helped me orchestrate, my fan page. So we're on Facebook, JCB Army. So I've been doing a live stream of this Saturday night just for thing went down. There's a few Saturdays I've missed, but for the most part, it's a lot of fun. I do feel like I covered songs. In fact, I covered one of your songs that you did a part of.
Oh, I'm sorry I missed that, man. I'll have to scroll through the feed and check that out. I would love to hear that. And once again, I'm speaking with Jeff Carlson, frontman, singer, band leader, and guitarist for the Jeff Carlson Band. And once again, that link, that's a Facebook group, right? JCB Army?
Yeah, JCB Army. Yep.
And the other links, of course, the one-stop shop. He's got a great website at JeffCarlsonBand.com. Go there and you can get links to all of the social media, the YouTubes, and all of the other cool stuff. There's videos, music, and more. Also visit RFLRecords.com for more about the JCB and Jeff's label mates on RFL Records. A lot of great bands on the label with you. Once again, that Facebook group, join up at JCB Army on Facebook. Jeff Carlson, thanks so much for the call, man, for the music, the friendship, and I'm sure we'll be seeing and hearing a lot from each other in the years to come. You're more than welcome. Here's another killer track from Jeff Carlson Band, Screaming Inside. Just let it out and let it rock. Hey, that was epic, man. That was really cool, and plenty of time to squeeze in that was great, man. Plenty of time to squeeze in both songs in that segment and the RFL commercial as well. Good job. Your audio sounds great. You're well-spoken and straight to the point, man. I appreciate that. Well... I know, man. Those are special moments. I've been through that with some of my heroes, like Kiss and Bon Jovi, and just rubbing elbows and working with people like that and hanging with them. It's truly an honor. It's a testament to your work ethic and your character and your talent. It shows that you're doing something right. You're doing it right. You've got the goods, and I wish you all the best. And can't wait to hear what happens next. My conversation with Don Dokken was not so much an interview, just a couple of old friends catching up. And Don and I can talk for days. Here's just a piece of that discussion. A project like this is as much about the memories as it is the music. How did it feel hearing some of these songs again for the first time in a long time?
it was brought back a lot of memories of me being in the studio in Hamburg, Germany, and 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning, and doing what we called when the studio's empty, we're on the DL, we're sneaking in there to record, and Michael would engineer, and we just sneak in there and and do demos, but after we got a record deal, I just forgot about that stuff. We wrote new songs, and it was a trip down memory lane for sure, because I was trying to remember, who did I write this about, and when was this written, and I couldn't remember, and I had to call like Juan Crucier, who did my first tour in Germany in '79, and I said, Juan, you remember that song Hit and Run? And he goes, yeah, and I go, there's a couple versions of it on the internet, but they're really terrible sounding. You wouldn't have a better version of it. When he goes, yeah, I got the master. I said, you do? Well, shit, man. Burn it to it. I said, you're kidding me, right? He goes, no, I got that song. I wrote it. And I actually said, you wrote it? I said, I wrote it. And he goes, no, I wrote it. He goes, you wrote the music, I wrote the lyrics, and you sang it. So he dug through his files, because he still has a studio with 2-inch, and he dug through his files, and he said, and if I can't find it, I'll call Michael Wagner, because he saves everything. So that's what happened. He sent me a copy of that. By accident, I was doing an interview with Swedish Rock Magazine, talking about this record coming out, and he said, yeah, I've got a copy of your first single, your first 7-inch single. I said, what? He goes, yeah, my brother saw you in Berlin in 1979, and you were selling little 45 singles, and he bought a couple copies, and he gave me one. It's in my files somewhere. And I went, you got to be shitting me, right? So he dug it up, and he said, now what do I do? I don't have a turntable. Wow. He had to go to a music store. He had to go to one of those old retro music stores and find a 45 turntable and hook up a bunch of wires and transfer it to a thumb drive to send it to me. So there's all these happy things that happened, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Wow. Making those songs. And before I was Dokken, there was no George, there was no Jeff, there was no Mick. It was just me, by myself, working with Drake Levin, who was a very famous guitar player in a band called Parker and the Raiders. And they were very big in America. And he took me in the studio, and we just made these demos, and they just kind of disappeared. And I was in shock to find these tapes.
Wow. Who else is playing on these tracks? I guess Juan Crucier, of course, is playing on some of this stuff. Is Greg Leon, Blotzer? Who else is playing on these tracks?
Yep. Greg Leon's in a couple of songs. And that was the second tour of Germany. I toured Germany in '79, was just a 3-piece. I was the lead singer, lead guitar player. Juan Crucier on bass, Ray Peck on drums, who ended up going to a band called Valentine. And the second tour of Germany, Greg Leon went with me, and we did our second tour of Germany with Greg and Gary Holland, who ended up going to Great White. So, it seems like everybody's been at Dokken at one or time.
That's right.
You think about it, even Frankie Bonelli was in Dokken for a moment,
Wow.
A lot of people were in Dokken back in the day, because you were not an L.A. guy. You were more a Tennessee guy,
That's right, yeah.
You were a Tennessee band, and so, in L.A., everybody was kind of hopping around to different bands,
Wow.
I'd call Frankie and say, I need a drummer, and, I got a show, and then Juan was playing with Rat, and he was playing with Dokken, and everybody was kind of just Chinese musical chairs in L.A.
Best-selling author Robert Duncan, former editor of Cream magazine, was an awesome interview, and he had a very interesting perspective on the pandemic and the future of concerts. I highly recommend his new book, Loudmouth, available at DuncanWrites.com. You've seen a lot of change during your career, man. How do you see the music industry, and especially the live concert industry, evolving in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Oh, my God. It's so sad. I think concerts will come back. Music is this deep need in the human psyche. So concerts will be back. Seeing live concerts is part of that deep need. But it's what a disaster. I live in small town outside San Francisco, 7,500 people, and we have several like 4 or 5 live music venues. A lot of musicians live in this town. A lot of back in when Jerry Garcia died, half the town was unemployed because they were all roadies or office workers or stuff like that for the dead. And 2 of the venues that have been around for 50, 60, 70 years have gone under in our town, and nothing. They've been around so long, nothing ever killed them, and they had music 7 days a week, 365. So I'm feeling it, close up and firsthand. I think it'll all come back. I mean, and it may take another generation. We may have to wait for young kids today to grow up, and they won't know what a disaster it was when concert halls and nightclubs and all that stuff crashed in the wake of COVID, and they'll start, they'll open their own concert halls and nightclubs. So it'll be back, but what a tragedy.
This is just a sample of what happens on the streets of rock and roll. Find out how to listen to the radio show at ronkeel.com. And stay tuned to hear my audio blog on the effects of COVID-19 on the music industry right after this.
Ride South. South by South Dakota. The new album from Ron Keel Band. A celebration of the Southern rock tradition. Featuring classic songs from all the iconic Southern rock legends. The Allman Brothers. Leonard Skinner. Outlaws. Molly Hatchet. Blackfoot. Marshall Tucker Band. 38 Special. South by South Dakota. The new album from Ron Keel Band and an unbelievable show. Visit ronkeel.com, highballmusic.com, and hvmentertainment.com. And Ride South.
I've been invited to participate in a new documentary film about the impact of COVID-19 on the music industry, and I wanted to share those thoughts and feelings with you. We're all taught early on that necessity is the mother of invention, right? The only thing that ever stays the same is change. And the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 changed everything for the entertainment business. Just like 9/11, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, just like the psychopath in 1982 who put cyanide into bottles of Tylenol at the grocery store. You remember that, right? People would take Tylenol and die because wackos were poisoning the bottles in the stores. That led to a new way of packaging. Almost everything we eat, or drink, or swallow has got protective seals on it. Every bottle that we buy, aspirin, milk, whiskey, you notice there's an extra layer between you and the product that's meant to keep you safer. Now, people that are younger than 30 or 35 may not even remember or know why those protective seals are on there. But back in the day, when I was a kid, we didn't have any of that stuff. This has cost the food and drug industries tens of billions of dollars for the last 3 decades, and it's never going back to normal because we wouldn't feel safe without that little protective seal, right? Just like the live entertainment experience is never going back to normal. Many people are never going to feel safe without that protective seal, whether it's a mask, a 6-foot personal perimeter between you and the next person, a vaccine, maybe. But like drugs, food, and drink, we're going to have to find new ways to package our products. Are you ever going to go to a stadium full of 70,000 people sitting or standing next to a stranger that doesn't have a mask on? Sure, some of us will, but will our attendance be enough to support the cost of producing these events? And just like 9/11 changed the way we travel forever, the fear factor is what gets us groped by the TSA every time we get on a plane, right? You can't even take your bottle of drinking water through security because everything changed that day, 9/11, and it's never going back to normal. Now, we have to be clear. The music industry and the live entertainment industry are not the same. Music is life, man. Music is the soundtrack of our souls. The music industry is a business that sells you those emotions: comfort, excitement, sexual arousal, nostalgia, love, anger, whatever. The live entertainment industry turns those emotions into an interactive public experience and sells you the opportunity to share that experience with a collective, the audience. When you sing along and raise your fist in the air with thousands of other people, you become a part of something special, proving that other people like the same things you like. They feel the same way that you do. You belong. You are not alone. It's not just concerts, but sporting events, movies, conventions, church, other spectator-driven gatherings. The need to gather is primal. It's a genetic necessity that it's been a part of our DNA since the dawn of mankind. Taking that away from us is far more dangerous than the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't want to come off as being insensitive to the plight of tens of thousands of people that work or used to work in the entertainment industry. The fear of COVID-19 has wrought irreparable havoc on their livelihoods. Many of these people have devoted years of their lives, energy, time, money, passion into developing a very specialized skill set that is often of little use in the real world. Notice that I said the fear of COVID-19. That fear is far more dangerous than the disease itself, because that fear will separate the family of mankind into isolation from which we may never emerge. The next logical step for the live entertainment industry may be to sell the virtual reality experience. You put on the headgear and put yourself into the crowd so it feels like you're right there with strangers and friends enjoying that shared experience. The microphone in your headgear maybe transmits your reaction to the performer's PA system, so the performer can actually hear you applaud and scream, sing along, and maybe the performers will even see you on a virtual screen in front of the stage with your fists in the air, I hope. Hell, we're already halfway there, paying to watch holograms of dead singers. These kids that are playing online video games on the couch are all on the same battlefield. They're all shooting each other, yelling at each other, and they're on different continents, different states, different, hundreds of miles apart. It'll be the same for the concert goers of the future, interacting with each other and the performers in a safe environment. Nobody drives drunk. Nobody gets sick. Hopefully somebody gets laid. And that's all well and good for the superstar artists who can afford to present you with their spectacular virtual concert production. Young up-and-coming singers and musicians will have to build a following playing the dive bars, so to speak, broadcasting shitty-sounding live streams from their garage or social media, giving away their music for free on the various streaming services, living off donations from their virtual tip jars until they can sell enough tickets to go on their virtual tour. Personally, I'm a survivor. I had my initial impact in the 80s touring with bands like Motley Crue and Bon Jovi. Sold a couple of million albums and had 3 of them land on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. All of that came crashing down hard in the 90s with the advent of grunge music, and suddenly an entire culture was wiped out of existence, or nearly wiped out of existence. Pretty much everything and everyone in the commercial hard rock and hair metal industry, including me, lost everything. I survived by reinventing myself as a country music artist, and I survived the devaluation of music as a result of online streaming, the death of MTV and the birth of YouTube, and this new normal where the majority of consumers think it's cool to get your music for free. They think it's crazy to pay for it and other entertainment when there's a whole world of free shit right at your fingertips. The strong survive Napster and will survive Spotify and YouTube. I imagine some may try to take it underground. Private gatherings with live entertainment that are against the guidelines and maybe even against the law. Just like our 1985 video, The Right to Rock. When they outlawed liquor during Prohibition, the mob made a killing off the underground bars and speakeasies. So nowadays, with Big Brother watching everything we do, that's not going to be so easy. I admit I was probably more prepared for 2020 than most of my peers. Not because I'm some genius, but because several years ago, my wife Renee was diagnosed with cancer. And suddenly, I was forced to live and work under an entirely new set of circumstances. Extensive travel was out of the question because I was determined to be by her side as she went through chemo, radiation, and multiple surgeries. And with her compromised immune system, sanitation became top priority. Washing hands all the time, wiping off the doorknobs and the light switches and remote control. So when the pandemic hit, we'd already developed these habits, and we already had a cabinet full of surgical masks. But I still had two basic professional needs. I had to entertain people, is who I am, and I had to make a living. So I figured out a way to entertain and interact with fans online. For my fans, we call them Keelaholics. They pay a monthly subscription fee at patreon.com/Ron Keel, and they get all the coolest stuff I can possibly give them. Online interaction, exclusive streaming audio and videos, concerts, music, live online chat, my radio show, my podcast, my audiobook, tons more that I will never post on other social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. And every day or two, I try and share some cool new thing to entertain these people. And you know what? They've become a community, a tribe, friends. My online subscription site is our gathering place, and it's not even so much about me anymore. It's about all of us. I'm also fortunate to call South Dakota home base, the only state in America that didn't totally shut down. We were able to do some shows in the Midwest, like the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally. I believe the rally will never shut down, so I'll probably have at least 5 shows a year for the rest of my life. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoy.